Akut Moed is Sunday, April 28th, 2024.
You're listening to Weather with Enthusiasm.
The summer heat is rapidly intensifying and reaching a very high magnitude. Levels that here in the United States, it's difficult for us to not only appreciate, but it's difficult for us to even recognize what's going on in other parts of the world. We're just going to focus on India just for a little bit. You see, those of us who grow up here in the United States, we're used to thinking that there's two different types of heat. There's a desert heat, the dry heat that occurs in Arizona and areas around there. And then you have the humid heat, where places like Florida, you have high humidity. Temperatures in the higher humidity areas tend to be lower. High temperatures in the low 90s would be a common theme for a place like Miami, Florida. And when you get into, let's say, like St. Louis, Missouri in the summer, there's almost like a joke amongst the National Weather Service that every single year they could tell you 6 months in advance the exact weather forecast for the 4th of July in St. Louis. Partly cloudy, a 30% chance for thunderstorms, hot and humid with a high around 90 degrees, lows around 70. That's just because that's the climate in St. Louis, but there are plenty of years where the temperatures go into the mid-90s. Temperatures even, I remember one year where it was 102 degrees. And then we have the years where there's more rain and temperatures remain in the 80s. But the high humidity and temperatures in the 90s here in the U.S. seem to go together. You go into Houston, Texas, that's probably the best example. Hot and humid conditions, normal highs in the mid-90s during the peak of summer, consistent mid-90s. You get into Phoenix, Arizona, consistently a high around 105. The difference is they're lacking the humidity. When you don't have much humidity, the sun becomes really efficient at heating temperatures up. Okay, now, so we're here in the United States. Most of us are not weather experts, and it's not even our thing. So, but we get the New York Times. Even as a child, people open up the New York Times, you turn to the weather section, and you look at the world cities. There's always that one city that sticks out. Any city using the Fahrenheit system, any city that can manage to get into triple digit, it's going to stick out. It's going to be in the hundreds. Those cities, you see, in the Celsius system, you don't have this. But the Fahrenheit system, you have this. So in the United States, there's that one city of the international cities that almost always sticks out, and it's the city New Delhi, India. So putting two and two together, making logic, it sounds simple. Oh, that must be the type, which is like Phoenix, Arizona. Every day it's in the triple digits. It's not like Florida. That's what the thinking is. To us here, Americans here in the United States who do not investigate the weather situation in India will be pretty convinced that the humidity is lacking in New Delhi, India. Furthermore, if you read about the highest humidity, highest dew point areas, which is a measure of humidity around the country, so the Gulf of Mexico is one of those places, which is a very humid area of the world, but also the Midwest Corn Belt. That's something more advanced. People who have a more advanced interest in weather will find out about that much later on, usually from a paper like the New York Times, and it requires a more complex understanding for how the Midwest Corn Belt is capable of increasing the humidity levels far beyond most bodies of water. But when you read about the humidity in the world, the Persian Gulf is really the body of water that stands out due to the very high water temperatures, and it's bodies with high water temperatures that's capable of producing high dew point air. But India becomes something that's skipped over. But then you get into some people who remember the robot Jupiter. It came out as a way of publicizing weather, kind of in the beginning of the internet stages, something which was put out by the MIT College. Jupiter really was the first time that I was exposed to the fact that New Delhi actually has high humidity. In addition to the triple-digit heat. This is a country that when they say there's a heat wave and they show imagery of very intense imagery of what it is, what happens during heat waves, that's something you could really believe. There's really no exaggerations over there. They're on the threshold of the most bearable heat that a human could possibly bear. And actually, the best indicator of that is something which is less well known. It's called the wet bulb temperature. Wet bulb temperatures of 35 degrees Celsius or 95 degrees Fahrenheit or higher is officially considered unbearable. What that basically means is no matter how hot it is, the wet bulb temperature tells you if there's sweat, if there's water, this is what your body's capable of cooling itself to. So it could be 100 degrees, but if the wet bulb temperature is only 72, then your body has a natural air conditioning. So you might have to stay hydrated, so you must stay hydrated, but you always have that defense mechanism of a natural air conditioner. But once the wet bulb temperature reaches 35 degrees Celsius, which is what is expected to happen in India this week, or 95 degrees Fahrenheit, that's when conditions literally become unbearable. So the heat in India is rapidly intensifying. The magnitude is very intense, and I think it's something that we rarely get here in the U.S. The first time we've ever had a true extended spell of such intense heat was last summer in Corpus Christi, Texas, and Galveston, Texas, but even more so in Corpus Christi, Texas. And even then, I don't know if the wet bulb temperatures ever really hit 35 degrees Celsius, 95 degrees Fahrenheit, but they came very, very close, and it could be that they did. This is when you have triple-digit temperatures, even 100 and teens Fahrenheit, 45 degrees Celsius combined with dew points in the 80s, 30 degree Celsius dew point, or slightly lower, and that's about it. So this is mind-boggling stuff that's happening in India. It's something that, although it does happen every year, it seems to be a little bit more intense. El Nino is to blame, says experts, as to why it's a little bit more intense this year than previous years. The hottest months in India are known to be March, April, and May, and then the monsoon season takes over, so the humidity gets higher, but the temperatures get a little bit lower. If you look at some of the hottest cities, the cities which will have the highest temperatures, you'll notice there's a drop in humidity in the afternoon, but it remains humid in many of these cities nonetheless, with temperatures of 110 to 115, dew points in the mid-60s, morning lows in the low 80s with dew points in the low 80s. That means the heat index really never drops under 110 degrees Fahrenheit, or the heat index never really drops under 43 degrees Celsius at any point during the day. When you're using the Celsius system, and we like to use round numbers, basically the heat index will never go under 40 degrees Celsius. In Canada, they call it a humindex. AccuWeather calls it a real feel temperature, which takes into account so many other variables. So there's a very dangerous situation developing in India. And we also have South Sudan, has some very, very intense stuff. It's covering many more countries, and there's certainly a lot more to say. Also have done episodes on India in the past, and we've covered India more in depth in the past as to why it does get that humid if it's not on the Persian Gulf. They do have very high water temperatures, but they also have agricultural, and the agriculture is what helps bring those temperatures, the dew points up, kind of like in the central parts of Africa. And we have soaring heat taking place also in South Sudan, as we have mentioned. I think one of the most shocking things that's taken place over the past couple of weeks, there's been quite a lot, but if you look in Tel Aviv, Israel, it's very consistent. The warmth is just very consistent every day mid-70s, and to just have a 2-day period where the temperature went into the hundreds is just weird. But they had a record April high of 105 degrees last Thursday. I wish everybody a Chag Kosher v'Sameach. Thank you for listening.
You've been listening to Weather with Enthusiasm.
This podcast can be found on almost every platform where podcasts are available.
You're listening to Weather with Enthusiasm.
We have a powerhouse typhoon which has developed off in the Pacific Ocean. Extreme heat continues over the desert southwest. A big shockaroo to many of you. This is especially true in regards to what's going to be going on in Alaska. We have parts of the world that are so hot right now. Temperatures are expected to go into the low 130s. What also makes the situation absolutely spectacular over there is the enormous differences between night and day. We have a remarkable weather pattern change that's going to be taking place over the next few days. We're going from one extreme to the next extreme. Small soft hail is falling with the storm. There's the possibility that snow squalls may develop. 27.1 barometric pressure. Feet of snow are falling in Japan when there's intense weather. That's a time of celebration. Just Google weather with enthusiasm and they're all going to come up.